Hey, how's it going? This is Joe and Tell, and in this video, I want to talk to you about the Monolith Encore T6 tower speakers. I previously reviewed the Encore B6 bookshelves, and those are some of my favorite speakers I've ever reviewed. But what about these floor standards? Let's find out. Full disclosure, Monolith is a channel sponsor. They did send these products in free for me to review, but I will always tell you guys how I really feel about these products no matter what. What really excites me are affordable products that allows others to get into this hobby. At $350 a pair for the B6 bookshelf, you're getting more value than you expect at that price. Those speakers sound so good. Now these T6 towers are $399 each or $379 each when you buy 2 or more on their website. That comes out to $758 for a pair of floor standing speakers. I'll leave a link in the description to these below. What you get for that price is a more capable version of the B6 bookshelf speakers with 3 6.5-inch woofers and a 2.5-way configuration, meaning that the bottom 2 handle bass duty while the third woofer takes care of the mid-range. Now the woofers themselves are the same as on the B6 bookshelf and the C6 center. You get the same 1-inch soft dome tweeter with the huge waveguide. On the back, you'll find that these have dual 5-way binding posts and a huge rear port. The result of the extra drivers and the larger cabinet volume is a speaker that is slightly more efficient than the bookshelf, but also has more low frequency bass extension. In my room, Odyssey Room Correction saw these as large speakers. The port allows it to have audible bass in the high 20 Hz range. Really? For most music, I think a lot of people would be satisfied with a bass, but if you're into bass heavy music, or if you plan on using these for a home theater, there's no replacing a capable sub or few, which Monolith also sells a ton of. These T6 towers have audible bass, but good subs have tactile bass that will shake your furniture. I've also seen that Dan Romer was involved with designing these, which is awesome considering he's done some great work with Arendelle and now with Perlisten. If you don't know, Perlisten makes some pretty high-end stuff with performance to match. The thing I really appreciate about the Encore series is that the voicing of all the speakers match. You would think that that's expected, but there are other products I've reviewed in the past where the bookshelf, the tower, and the center all had different frequency responses. The tonality, timbre, voicing, whatever you want to call it, of the bookshelf speaker, the tower, and the center are all the same, despite the tower being much larger and the center actually being a sealed enclosure. The only difference I've found in my measurements is the amount of low frequency bass extension they can output, with the towers having the most and the center having the least. The finish is the same with the black ash wrap and the gloss black top and bottom. Overall, it's a pretty basic design with just the right amount of shine to not look boring. I do like the way it looks with the grills off more than I like them with the grills on. These come with outrigger feet, which need to be attached, but it's as easy as putting in a few screws. They do have spikes and rubber feet in case you don't want to scratch up your floor. I think they give the speaker a nice look overall. At this price point, I've seen manufacturers skimp out on stuff like that, but Monolith did not. If you're curious, these come in at 49.2 pounds each. So I know what you're asking, how do these sound? They have all the qualities I liked in the Encore B6 bookshelf, but with more bass extension and a bit more efficiency, which allows them to play a bit louder prior to reaching distortion limits. They still have that large waveguide, which seems to help control the directivity to give it a smoother transition to the woofers. Nothing about the sound was offensive to me, but I can see them perhaps being slightly bright to some people and just right for others. I know some of you like a little bit of extra top end. I do think that the bass is one of the most impressive things about these. They do have audible bass in the high 20 Hz range in room, and I also mentioned that Odyssey Room Correction detected these as large, full range speakers as a result. As you guys know, I do like bass, but you will see these have a little bit more of a bass bump compared to the bookshelves, and you'll see why when I show the measurements. It's easy enough to EQ out if you prefer more neutral bass or if you have issues with booming bass in your room. I always prefer to have more bass rather than less because it's easier to cut than the boost. They claim a frequency response of 37 Hz to 20 kHz. This is rather conservative considering 37 Hz is where the port takes over and it still has some good output below that. I'll take conservative specs over exaggerated ones any day. One interesting thing to note is that the crossover between the mid woofer and the tweeter is 1.35 kHz, up from 1.2 kHz on the B6, which is still low for a tweeter. They say they chose that point because that's where it sounded best considering they're using the waveguide for reinforcement of the lower end of the frequency range. The crossover from the woofer to the mid woofer happens at 180 Hz. These are 4 ohm speakers with a sensitivity of 87.8 decibels at 2.83 volts. These are not the most efficient speakers out there, and they're also not the least. I know there are a few companies that are a little bit lax with their sensitivity ratings, so be careful not to compare these to speakers whose sensitivity ratings are based on in-room response. I'm looking at you, Klipsch. If you're worried about being able to power them, I wouldn't. Most modern AVRs can handle this. They don't state the power handling on the site, which I found kind of odd. I've played these over 105 dB from 9 feet away, at full range, no sub, and I didn't hear any audible distortion. An online calculator suggests that it requires around 100 watts per channel. It handled that with ease. I do hope that Monolith puts that spec on the website soon. Overall, I think that these are a steal at their current price. I'm sure there are other speakers that have better measurement specs, but at what cost? Under $758 a pair for floor standers? Let me know in the comments what you think would beat these at this price. If you're into sound demos, I do have a binaural demo of these in the description below. Before I put these on the speaker leaderboard, let's take a quick look at some of the measurements I took in room using the moving mic method. I'm taking this from Aaron, where he does a plus or minus 3 dB window, and it just makes it easy to see what's going on. So you can see that most of this fits within plus or minus 3 dB, but there are some pretty large swings that we see here. This small dotted line is the plus or minus 1 dB. So if it stays within that, then that's an excellent speaker. Usually you'll see a lot of speakers that use DSP that are able to stay within this range here. Plus or minus 3 dB is pretty good. You do see that, generally speaking, I would say that it's a little bit bright, like I was saying earlier. These narrow dips, I don't know that you'll hear, but something to take note of. The other thing that you'll notice is that it is a rising bass response here, which I mentioned earlier. This does show a dip here in the crossover region, which does not show up in their measurements on their website. So this is from their website. What I did here was I overlaid theirs over the one that I took, and you can see for the most part the trend kind of follows, except for here at the crossover range. There's a big difference from what I measured and what they measured. Also, they're not seeing this dip here at about 8.5 kilohertz. Not sure why. I was able to replicate that numerous times. Also, the other thing you'll notice is that where the bass falls off, they have the smooth line that goes across. I wasn't able to measure that. What I saw was that the driver started falling off, and then later on the port started taking over. The smooth response is maybe something that you'd expect in a room, but not what I was able to measure. Again, mine are just in-room responses, and it's very difficult to measure some of these floor standing speakers because the drivers are really spaced apart, and so is the port. Real quickly, I'm gonna bring in the B6 bookshelf speaker in purple, and you can see that that's a flatter response. Let me take off the T6 for a second. Let me take off the T6, and you can see that it's almost staying within this 1.5 decibel window for more of the time than the T6. Generally, I would say that they do have similar tonality, but the treble is bumped up maybe about 1 or 2 decibels. So you can see here that you do get more bass extension than the bookshelf, as we'd expect. So maybe they're just trying to account for that. So this here is what I like to call my ghetto spinorama. In black, you'll see the on-axis response. In green is the listening window. You see that if you're not directly on axis, the treble is reduced as you'd expect. The red line is the sound power, meaning the measurement all around the speaker. And this dark red line is the directivity index, which I wouldn't trust anything below, let's say 800 hertz. You see it starts getting kind of crazy, but so let's just say above 1 kilohertz, you can see that the directivity is pretty good. Nice and smooth, except for this little area that I mentioned earlier, which means that you can correct this using DSP and you shouldn't have too much of an issue. Because my measurements are done in room and I'm not using a clipple, I would take this area and this area below 1 kilohertz with a grain of salt. Hopefully we'll start seeing some measurements from the guys with clipples very soon. Here I've tried to isolate the drivers. In purple you'll see the tweeter, and you'll see that it does cross over where they said around 1.3 kilohertz. So this is the mid woofer here in red. I'll bring in one of the woofers here in green that's just for bass duty, and the last one which also has the same crossover point. You'll notice that those crossover around here where they said 180 hertz. Because all 3 woofers are playing this 180 hertz and below region, that's why I believe that you're getting that bass bump in the frequency response here. All of them are playing the same frequencies. And finally, here is the port taking over. So you can see here that this is why I'm kind of getting that dip in the response before the port takes over. But this is also why you'll see that Odyssey is seeing this as a speaker that is full range, because this port really is putting out some usable output down in the 20-ish hertz region, which is kind of crazy. So the port is placed near the bottom of the enclosure, so the floor acts as a boundary. If you have them near a wall, that's another boundary, and that's where you get some extra gain from the port. Let's go ahead and put these on the speaker leaderboard. All right, here we are at the speaker leaderboard. These fit into the tower category. Are they above the Larson 4.2s? I'm gonna have to put them underneath. These are over $2,000, these Larsons. The reason I like these is not because their tonality is better. I would say the Monolith might even have a more accurate frequency response. These Larsons are a bit different in that they're meant to go against the wall, and they're angled, meaning that they're trying to avoid some of their first reflections. Something it does very special. The T6 tower is more of a standard speaker. Along with that are some of the issues that go along with that, meaning if you place them close to a wall, you may get some cancellation. You might get some comb filtering in the high frequencies if it's too close to a sidewall, and you have to be more careful of your first reflection points with these if you don't have room treatment. But that's with most normal speakers. The only exception are these Larson 4.2s because they are designed for that purpose. So these do come in under $800 for the pair, and they will definitely go on top here, beating out some of my old favorites, the Den 85th anniversary. Love the build quality, the way those looked. The Klipsch, the 5s, I just like the whole feature set and the fact that they were able to use DSP, HDMI ARC. The Kali Audio IN5s sound excellent for powered speakers at this price range. They're a concentric driver, lots of good things going for them, but the T6 tower has to go on top under $1,000. They're just an excellent deal. So last but not least, best overall sound quality regardless of price. I've said it before that I really need to rearrange this. Some of this stuff is just a little bit out of whack if you ask me. The Polk Audio Reserve R200s probably deserve to be above the Den 85th anniversary in terms of sound quality. Unfortunately, I don't have these anymore to compare, but just going based off measurements, I would say that that is true. I think you could make the case that the T6 towers deserve to be above the Polk Reserve R200s. As of right now, the Polk Audio Reserve are $750 a pair, so about the same price as these T6 towers. So you could make the case that the T6 are a better deal because you're gonna definitely have more bass output with this floor standing speaker. But from my measurements, the Polk Audio does have a more accurate, more neutral frequency response, and I do like that. So let me go ahead and take a look at this. The Encore B6 bookshelf actually has a more accurate frequency response for my measurements. And so you can also argue that this should be above the T6 tower. And so it's really close. If you're planning on using a sub, I wouldn't mind using the B6 bookshelf because it has a more accurate frequency response. If you're gonna go with a 2-channel setup, you maybe wanna just get the T6 tower because of that extra bass output. Now, if you're gonna be using an AVR or something with room correction such as Odyssey or Dirac, it's almost a toss-up at that point. It doesn't really matter because you'll be able to correct these and get them to sound pretty much the same anyway, with a T6 tower, of course, having more bass, and you can't add that much more bass to the B6 bookshelf to match this. You could make the case that the B6 bookshelf should be above this because it does have a more accurate response, and at half the price, man, what a deal. I'll actually go ahead and leave the B6 bookshelf up here just to be controversial. What do you guys think? All right, there you have it. I'll leave a link to these in the description if you're interested in getting some for yourself. I've been using these as my main left and right in my dedicated theater, and I've been extremely happy with them. These are my go-to recommendation at this price. So that's it. If you found this video useful or entertaining, make sure to like, subscribe, ring the bell to be notified when I upload new videos. That's it. Take care. Bye-bye.